Have you ever been fooled by a counterfeit? A friend one day showed me his watch and he told me with a twinkle in his eye that it was a genuine imitation Rolex. And it was. He had bought it in Singapore in a market for $20 or something. It was packaged like a Rolex. It looked like a Rolex, but it wasn't a Rolex. It was an imitation. He probably had another one by now. Good for a laugh, I guess, but not so good if you paid $1,000 for it thinking it was genuine. How must God feel when his brand, the Sabbath, has been counterfeited? In this epic story, the devil not only misrepresents the character of God, but counterfeits and distorts every truth that God has given us. Now, you'd expect that from the devil, wouldn't you? He's the author of confusion. Some people are so confused that they conclude it doesn't matter what you believe. But it does matter. God saw this master deception coming, and that's one reason why he's given us his word, the Bible, to reveal what he's really like and what truth is. God is love. Therefore, he reveals the counterfeit to us. Come and join us as we explore this intriguing subject further. Gary, how come that people keep Sunday today?
It's a good question, but the Bible has a fantastic answer, actually. You may remember when Jesus was here, he said, study the book of Daniel in Matthew 24. When we go to the book of Daniel, we've come across an amazing chapter which actually shows us, predicted it, that this would take place. Daniel chapter 7. Let me just read the one verse to introduce this chapter. Verse 3, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. So here Daniel sees 4 beasts come out of the briny ocean, and then he launches into an amazing chapter.
In fact, these are not ordinary beasts, Gary. They've got special characteristics. In fact, let me read in verse 4, the first beast. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A man's heart was given to it. These are not normal beasts. In fact, there were 3 more. There was the bear with three ribs coming, 3 ribs and stood on one foot. And then the third one was the leopard with 4 heads, 4 wings, strange animals. And then the last one, in fact, the verse 7, it says, it was a dreadful and terrible beast, exceedingly strong. It was not the same. It seems that the 4th one was really different.
Danielle, what do these beasts represent?
Well, you know, Jeff, the Bible makes it really, really clear in verse 17. It says those great beasts, which are 4 kings which arise out of the earth. So we're actually talking about kings.
Or kingdoms, yeah. I guess when you think about it, it's a bit like the cartoonist. You know, you pick up the morning newspaper and you see a lion and a kangaroo. We know the kangaroo represents Australia and the lion represents Great Britain. And I guess that really the Bible was the first book to use animals to represent nations.
In fact, I believe Daniel here, he must have really... something must have come to his mind when he thought, when he saw 4 kingdoms, 4 kings, because that's exactly what we see in Daniel 2. And this is what I love with the Bible, because Daniel 2, we have the prophecy of the statute with the different metals. And now Daniel 7 will bring the same thing, but will add more information of what will take place in the end of time. Notice that, for example, the lion of Daniel 7 parallels the head of gold of Daniel 2.
Which was Babylon.
Which was Babylon, exactly. And then the second beast, which was the bear, parallels the breast and the arms of silver. And then we get, which is Medo-Persia. And then we get the third one, which is the belly of bronze, which represents, which parallels...
the 4 leopards.
The leopards, yeah, with the 4 heads. And then the last one, of course, we know, because we know Daniel 2, which is the legs of iron, parallels the fourth beast, which is the dreadful one.
We've got Babylon, followed by Medo-Persia, followed by Greece, followed by Rome, the Roman Empire.
And of course, it continues in Daniel 2, because Rome will be divided to form divided Europe. Huh?
Yes.
Europe
Yes.
divided.
You know, Genial, when you talk about that, I still get excited because the first time I ever heard about these prophecies, I actually didn't believe them.
Wow.
And I remember particularly with Daniel 2 and the medals and the order of the medals, and then, you know, later on finding out which of the kingdoms these represented, I thought, that can't possibly be true.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my grandparents' place and getting out their encyclopedias and going through the history of Babylon, which sure enough led to the history of Medo-Persia and then Greece and then Rome. And then to find out what we know now, you know, with the Dead Sea Scrolls and the fact that the book of Daniel has been dated to have been written around 600 years before Jesus existed, which was in the time of Rome.
Yes,
I
exactly.
mean, how can somebody predict 600 years of history and get the order exact? I mean, for me, that was just convincing evidence that, hey, you know, listen up. This is not just any book. You know.
Well, Gary, tell us about the fifth power, because I'm sure that after there's been 1, 2, 3, 4, number 5. Which is number 5?
Well, number 5 is actually part of that fourth beast. Because you'll notice in verse 8, he says, talking of this beast with 10 horns. Well, I don't think we read that one. The terrible beast, it had iron teeth and 10 horns. Then it says in verse 8, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them. So here comes this little horn among these 10. And then it says, before whom 3 of the first horns, so 3 of the 10 horns, was plucked up by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words.
So historically, how did that work out?
Because that's literally kingdoms, 10 kingdoms rising up, 3 being plucked out, and then having that little horn come up, a man speaking pompous words. So how does that man fit in?
Okay, I think a couple of things we should notice. Number 1, he pulls up 3 as he comes up. Number 2, he comes from among the 10, this little horn. And so perhaps if we just look at a little bit of history of the Mediterranean world for a moment. We all know that Christianity began in Jerusalem, time of Jesus and the followers of Jesus.
Gary, just before you talk about that, I just want to get it clear in my mind. Rome falls, and then it's divided into 10 divisions. That's what the Bible's saying.
Exactly.
What are those 10 divisions?
Okay.
What do we call that today?
Yeah, today we would call that Western Europe, basically. The nation, the Roman Empire in the West broke up into these 10 divisions, and these became the forerunners of what we call Europe. For example, the Anglo-Saxons became the English, and the Franks became the French, and so on. So this is, Rome continues, but in a sense, it's divided Roman Empire into these various areas which constitute Western Europe.
And so this little horn is coming up in Europe.
Western Europe.
Okay,
Exactly.
all right. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's a good point. So Christianity begins in Jerusalem. By the first century, Christianity spread right across the Mediterranean world. We know Paul took it to many places, and it's a tremendous force. Then 70 AD happens, and Jerusalem is destroyed. Up until this point, Jerusalem had been the centre of the Christian religion. Now the centre of Christian religion moves from Jerusalem, because it is no more, and it gravitates more and more to Rome, the city of Rome in the heart of the Roman Empire. And so we find that over the next 2 centuries, there's a lot of persecution in the Christian church. But at the end of that, here comes an emperor, the first Christian emperor, Constantine. And so about 312, 313, he becomes he accepts the Christian faith as a relevant force in the empire. He eventually becomes a Christian, but he favours Christianity, and we find that certainly by the end of that century, Christianity is the official religion of the Roman Empire. However,
Yes, I was just going to ask John, who is this little horn that comes out of Europe, out of the 10 divisions, that uproots 3?
Well, when we take the Bible and we compare it with history, it's the medieval church. It's the Christian church. In fact, when we study Daniel 7, we have several different identification mark, and it falls on the Christian church.
That's a pretty shocking
I know.
revelation, isn't it?
I think something too, Jeff, on this one, just quickly, when you track a little bit more of the history of the Christian church and Europe, you find that the bishops of Rome were in a hotspot, because three of those powers, the Ostrogoths, the Heruli and the Vandals, ruled that part of Europe for a while and made it very difficult for the bishops of Rome, who called soldiers from the Eastern Roman Empire, where the emperors were living, for their armies to help them. And eventually, by 538 AD, they're destroyed, and there's a vacuum. And so the emperor of the Roman Empire, who this time was Justinian, he says, hey, really, the bishops of Rome fill the vacuum. And so these fellows become not just religious leaders, but political leaders. And so here is a new power rising in Europe.
Danielle, this little horn, how's it described? What's it going to do according to the prophecy?
Yeah. It says, would you like me to read from verse 21, Jeff?
Well, maybe, I was thinking verse 25 is the key verse.
Yeah, we get right into it if we get down there. Verse 25, it says, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change the times in the law. And then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, and half a time.
I mean, that's a preposterous thing, isn't it, really, when you think about it? This power is going to come along and think himself able to change
Times and laws.
the law of God. I mean, it can't be Jesus, because, you know, we all remember what Jesus said in the Beatitudes, didn't he? On the Sermon on the Mount there, where he said, don't think I've come to destroy the law, I've come to fully preach it, to uplift it. And not even a jot or a tittle will pass away from the law. So obviously this power is not Jesus, it's the very opposite to Jesus. And it seems that we once again are in this great controversy, this great war that's going on.
It's an attack from the enemy.
Yes.
Right there on the law of God. That's serious stuff here.
So, John, tell us a little bit about this this business, or this plan here to change the times and the law.
We're talking about the Sabbath right here. Because today we know the true day of worship is no longer the seventh day like the Bible teaches us. The majority of Christians are keeping Sunday. So there has been the change in time where the Sabbath has been moved from Saturday to Sunday.
Can I just backtrack on that? I'm just, because some of our viewers may not quite understand that the only one of the 10 Commandments that deals with time is the fourth commandment.
Exactly.
I mean, no one of the 10 Commandments, except number 4, which says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, 6 days, 7 days of Sabbath, is the only one that deals with time.
That's right.
So that, therefore, it's being referred to here when it talks about the law and the times within the law.
Exactly.
But not only would the times be changed, it also says the law.
The law. That's why when we look at the 10 Commandments, we see the second commandments have been removed. The one that says, thou shalt not bow down before graven image.
This is not in the Bible. This is not in the Bible, you mean? You said the second commandment's been removed.
Yeah, well, the Christian church I'm talking about.
Okay. In the teaching book or something.
You go in the Catechism, for example, we no longer see that second commandment there. So it has been removed exactly like God had predicted through Daniel. Now we have 9. If we remove the second one, then the 10th one now has been divided to compensate for that one that we don't have. So indeed, exactly like Daniel saw through that vision, the enemy has done a dirty job through the Christian church to attack God's law.
That change you were talking about recently, just a few weeks ago, I looked up on the internet to see that, and I noticed the same in the Catechism on the internet. You have that alteration.
What did you look up, Gary? So that
Just on the website, just looked up the 10 Commandments as in Catechism, and it just came up on the internet, outlining. It was on the church's website.
And so the second commandment, which talks about images, has been left out.
Left out. And to get 10, they divide the last one, as John said, into 2. So thou shalt not covet your neighbour's wife, and thou shalt not covet your neighbour's goods. They're 2 separate ones in the Catechism, but in the Bible they're all one. And in actual fact, some years ago I was studying the Bible with a lady who, when she saw that, she said, "Oh man, I feel cheated, you know, that I thought there was 10, but there's really only 9 in the teaching book that she'd been taught from."
I guess this is where the whole matter of what we're talking about, counterfeit, comes in, because people think that they're keeping the 10 Commandments, because there are still 10, aren't there?
Yeah.
Well, the Bible says it.
But unless you read the Bible,
That's right.
you would never know that there's been a change.
That's why we must go back to the Bible. Those who truly love the Lord, this is our compass. We must have the first and the last say.
Yes.
You know, and you know, if you don't mind, what really touches me is that even Paul speaks about that, because we've been reading in the Old Testament. Daniel says it, but Paul says the same thing right there in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, I'll read verse 3 and 4. Listen to that, folks. It says, "Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first." What is it all about? "And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God." Right there, Paul predicts the coming of the lawless one, the one that will attempt to take the place of God.
Because that's what sin is, isn't it? It's about against the commandments of God, the law of God. So the lawless one, or the man of sin.
Exactly.
It's a pretty audacious claim when you think about it, isn't it? I mean, Paul is saying he's going to think himself God on earth. I mean, that's a stupendous claim, isn't it?
And that's what Daniel said, in fact, when we read, the pompous, he will speak pompous word.
Yeah.
In fact, in Revelation, the prophecy continues. It is amplified. But we see the same thing happening. In fact, verse 7, I don't know if Gary wants to read that.
Okay. "For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work." So it's already begun, even in Paul's time, by the looks here. It's already begun. Then verse 8, he says, "Then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming." So from Paul's day, it goes on down. It must be a growing force through time.
So
but it's a lawless force.
Yeah, which is the same as what Daniel said.
Exactly.
Against the law.
Exactly.
Paul says lawlessness, which is against the law.
This is why when Bible students study the book of Daniel, they see that Paul is quoting from Daniel 7, Revelation is quoting from Daniel. That's where they're getting their idea from the book of Daniel, with the lawless, the changing of the commandments of God. Which is
Danielle, I guess that one of the things also that impresses me when we read 2 Thessalonians is the fact that the Antichrist, this power, was even beginning in Paul's day.
Yeah.
And it sort of goes right through until Christ destroys him at his second coming. So obviously the Antichrist, this power that's opposing God, is not some individual that lives in our day only.
No.
The system has been around for the last 2,000 years. It's still alive and well and will continue through until Jesus comes.
And, you know, the thing that's interesting about that too, you know, we're talking about this, you know, man that's going to speak pompous words against the Most High, and she'll seek to change the times and the laws. You know, when we look at, you know, Exodus 20, and when the 10 Commandments in their entirety are laid out, you know, right next to the Sabbath, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, insinuating that at some point in time, the Sabbath is going to be forgotten. And why is it important to remember, you know?
That's a good point.
Gary, I come back to the question, though, that I asked you at the beginning. How come Christians are keeping Sunday?
Okay, yeah. Well, when we've seeing what the Scriptures predicted, because there's no question Daniel is predicting it, and Paul is talking about a change, the lawless one to come. When we look at the history of the Sabbath and this Sunday whole thing, we notice that in the New Testament, in the first century, Christians are clearly keeping the seventh day, the Saturday Sabbath. I mean, Paul is keeping the Sabbath many times. Jesus is keeping the Sabbath, and John in Revelation is keeping the Sabbath. So in the first century, the Sabbath is quite clearly kept. When we come, however, to the second and the fourth centuries, we notice that from history, when we go to history books, people throughout the Mediterranean world are starting to keep 2 days, which is interesting. Not only Sabbath, and the history documents show us that, but they're also keeping Sunday. So 2 days, 2nd to the 4th century, people are keeping 2 days. Except in Rome, they're only keeping 1 day by the 4th century. And we may wonder, well, why 2 days? The reason for that was because in Rome, this was the headquarters of the pagan religion up until the 4th century. So from 100 to 200, this is the heart of the pagan Roman Empire, and these people were worshipping the sun god. For example, we have Mithraic religion, which is sun worship. And so why do the Christians take on Sunday then? Because, you see, they felt, well, this is something that our pagan friends have, but they now took Sunday, gave it Christian trappings, if you like, the Son of God, the Son of Righteousness. And so Sunday began to be absorbed by the Christians until Constantine comes along, who actually, to unite his empire, he mandates the keeping of Sunday.
John Noel, coming back to this matter of Sunday, why was it so easy for people to keep Sunday?
I think Gary has said a little bit about it, but because of paganism at that time, there was the tension between the Jews and the Roman Empire, and so the Christians did not want to identify themselves with the Jews, so they started to keep Sunday. That's one of the reasons, and of course along the line we see that eventually the church came and stamped their authority on that day.
That's a very important point, I believe, because by the 5th and 6th centuries, the church is actually saying you shall not worship on the Sabbath. Now, what a tragedy when Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, and now the church is saying, no, you mustn't keep this day. That's it.
I guess there's one point that we ought to make clear, and that is, are we saying that because a person keeps Sunday, that they're a bad person? Is that what we're saying?
Absolutely not.
Certainly not, isn't it? Because personally, I was brought up to keep Sunday. I was brought up in the Presbyterian Church. I never knew anything about this. This was all a shock to me. I couldn't believe it. Because I guess in my family, like most others, we simply followed on what my parents told me and what their parents told them and what their parents told them, what their parents told, ad infinitum, back to this long ago that we know nothing about except from history.
Right.
And it's not until perhaps we're challenged to look into these things that suddenly we begin to realise that some of the things that we've accepted as traditions are not necessarily biblical.
Right.
And so we're not saying that people are bad people. What we're saying is that when God has impressed our hearts with truth, and I believe that every viewer who's watching this, God has impressed them to watch it.
It's not by accident.
It's not by accident. No. God is moving in their hearts. Yes. And if we remain a teachable spirit, God's Spirit will continue to teach us.
Absolutely, Jeff. I mean, I resonate with that quite well too. I grew up in a home where, there was no mention of God. It's, my family didn't believe in God. And when I became about 16, I started going to a Baptist church and kept Sunday. And as far as I knew, if you're a Christian, you go to church on Sunday and all of that. And it wasn't till after I actually lost a baby and I started to want to go back to, where is he and looking into church and wanting to know the difference, that a guy I was working with went to church on a Sabbath. And when I was asking questions, I knew he was a Christian, so I just sort of asked questions. And I thought, well, this is weird because, everyone I've ever heard of goes to church on Sunday and other than a Saturday. But, to really study it out and know why things have changed.
Well, I think it's remarkable that the Bible's actually predicted it.
Yeah, exactly.
I wasn't taken by surprise. And that word remember.
Yes.
And the question that I'm asking right now, is it so crucial? Is it going to die out, or what is going to happen?
Well, I think what we can say is that this is part of that great controversy, that epic story of that conflict that's going on between Christ and Satan. And it's not just a cosmic war. It's more than that. It's a personal war. And we have identified in this great controversy theme today, we have identified the villain. And we have noticed that he, according to the Bible, has changed times and laws. And I just want to read a verse that resonates, I think, in our hearts. Back in the book of Ezekiel, the 20th chapter, in verse 20. Now, 2020, because we talk about easy to remember. where it says, God says, hallow my Sabbaths, and they will be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. Because many people say to me, why do you get so het up over a day? What difference does it make? Saturday, Sunday, keep any day. It does matter because, as Ezekiel says here, it is a sign between me and you. That is, God is saying the Sabbath is a sign between him and us, that the Lord is our God. That's why the Sabbath is important. It's not just a fight over days. It's a bit like a flag. If I was to have a Nazi flag flying outside my home, could I blame you for thinking that I was a Nazi? I might deny it, but the flag tells you what's in my heart. And so the Sabbath is really the flag that we fly to indicate our love for Jesus. And remember what Jesus said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And one of those commandments, as we've noticed today, says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days, the seventh day is the Sabbath. And it may be new to many of us, and we may be troubled in our hearts, but I will pray that God will give you a heart that is responsive to his Holy Spirit as we study more and more of these wonderful subjects. Let us pray together. Our wonderful Father in heaven, I thank you again for the wonderful story that you have revealed to us, that we are in the midst of a battle between right and wrong, between Christ and Satan, and that you want to indicate that we show our loyalty to you. And one of the ways that we show our loyalty, according to what you have taught us, is by keeping your commandments, not as a means of getting to heaven, but because we love you. And so I pray that you'll bless every viewer today, bless each of us, keep us faithful and help us to always do what you want us to do, and keep us until that day Jesus comes. I pray for Christ's sake. Amen.